Hello everyone, welcome to the session of programming in Python. This session focuses on the topic functions. In the previous classes, we have covered quite a few topics, something like decision making, operators, loops, data types, data structures like lists and dictionaries, and we also practiced certain hands-on questions in the preceding sessions that made use of these concepts collectively and arrived at a common program that would solve a problem, right? In this session, we'll see how the functions are used, how they are useful. Before I discuss functions, I just want to bring your focus towards certain functions which we have already been using commonly all this while. So I'm pretty sure you know what a print is, what an input is, what a length is, sum, right? And max, range, and many more. We had been using them at many places. We would use print to print something on the screen. For example, I can print 100 on the screen. Let me show you a few examples. If I use this function, what is this? I'm just writing this function and I'm placing a parenthesis here, and within the parenthesis I would put some data here and it would print 100. If I put two contents here like 100 comma 200, then two contents are being printed. I can also use the input function and I can put a prompt message inside. Enter your name. And what's going to happen is whatever data this input function is going to fetch from your keyboard, I can store it in a variable called as data, something like this. And let me print what has been fetched and stored in this particular variable. Let me print it out. So you see, let me give it Abhishek Sinha, and it says Abhishek Sinha, correct? All right. That being said, so you are familiar with these inbuilt functions like print, input, max, min, length. Uh, Today we'll learn a little more in depth of these functions. Okay. So function is nothing but they are a block of statement which would do a certain task, and you can and we name this block of code by certain meaningful name, and we can always call a function to get the job done. For example, when I say print, perhaps the Python is aware that what a print does, it prints something on the screen. So every time I have to print, what I would do, I would call that function, uh, and within the parentheses, I would supply in the content which I need to get printed on the screen. If you want to understand this function on a real life example, let me try to correlate it with a daily example. For example, if you are staying in a room with your friend and your friend knows to do certain task, say switch on the fan or switch on the TV or log into your Netflix account, what would you do? You would just call out your friend's name, and since friend is aware what he's supposed to do, he will immediately switch on the fan or he would immediately switch on the television, right? In a similar way, when I call the print function here in Python knows that this print function is supposed to do a job. What job? To print something on the screen. And that's what gets printed on the screen like 100, right? But these are fine as long as Python is aware about them. Python knows what print is, what input is, what length function is, what min function or max function is. But because these functions are defined already within the Python documentation, yeah, when you install the Python, these functions are already defined. But what if you were to create a function of your own? Yep. How do you do that? When I were to create a function of my own, let me create. We write def keyword. Def means you're defining a function. And then I would write function name. Okay. I would parenthesis, and this would going to contain body of the function. Okay. And if I were to call this function, I will just have to write the name and put parentheses here. Okay. So let me write, instead of body, let me write a meaningful instruction here. Say print hello I am inside the function. Okay. So since I'm calling the function once, let's see what happens. It prints, hello, I'm inside the function. Let me call it twice. It print twice. What's happening here? Let's try to understand. You know that Python, so basically you can say that function is also something that controls the flow of program. Just like your if and else and loop would control the flow of program. For example, I told you the Python is coming top to bottom like this while executing all the instructions that are falling in between, right? In case it encounters a decision making, say it is encountering an if else. If it is true, Python will take if body and it will continue its journey. Okay. However, suppose in the decision making, if is false, then it will take the else route, right? And it would continue its journey. So you can see that the flow of Python is getting disrupted. It is taking different routes. The same thing happens in the concept of loops. Python would come naturally from top to bottom, and suddenly it founds a for loop or a while loop. It keeps on executing certain instruction for certain n number of times, and once it is done, it then moves forward, right? What happens in function is in the natural flow, at some point you would define your function. What do you mean by defining a function? It is like a set of instruction you shall write at this point. Okay, this is how you define a function by the keyword define name, define function name, right? This is how you define a function. Let me write few more lines. Python would come top to bottom. Python is coming from top to bottom. It would read this and it would move forward. Once it has passed from this particular area, it is aware of that there is a function which goes by this name, and this is what it does. Okay. So at this point, suppose you're calling a function. At this point, if you're calling a function, what happens is Python immediately jumps from this point. It comes to the position where the function is defined. It would execute that line of codes, and it will come back at here, and it will move forward. Suppose it is encountering another call to that function here, it will again jump back here. It will run those lines of code, and it will again come back here to continue its journey. That's how it happens. But uh, why do we need a function at the first place? Okay, why would you need a function? To understand that, let me write something. Let me write a sample code. Say first name equals to Abhishek, and the L name, last name equals to Singh. Full name, base. Let me write this repeatedly. Okay, here I'm gonna replace it by Abhijit Verma, Rohit Sharma. Okay, let me also shortly print full name after writing these lines of code and run it. You would observe that I have written almost similar code 3 times, isn't it? The only thing that is changing is the names. The only thing that is different is what you see in the red color. The data is changing, the content is changing. However, the instructions are same. The first name gets stored in the variable f name, the last name gets stored in the L name, then a full name variable is created to contain the full name, and that is what is printed. The same thing is done again with the another name and the another name. And when we print in sequence, these different names are printed because these different names were being created here, right? This was a small code. These are just 4 lines of code. However, these are very small. Of course, I found it easy to replicate it repeat these instruction. But if this was 100 lines of code or 150 lines of code or 20 lines of code, it would have been difficult for me to repeat the same code time and again. What if there were too many data which were changing? There were high chances that I would make some mistake, right? And that's when the concept of functions comes into play. So function is a concept, a very fundamental concept, you can say in Python, which contains a block of code which can be executed anytime. This block of code or this function can also take some values with towards it, and it can also return some output. Okay, so it can take input values also, it can return some output values also. For example, the same thing, the same code which I have written here, let's try to recreate the same in a function. I'll write define print full name. Okay, so what I just did is I am creating a function which goes by the name print full name, and here I will expect two contents, two data. You can say two parameter also. That's what the technical term is. Let me say x comma y, or let me say f name, okay, and l name. Inside I'm going to create full name, okay, and then I'm going to print full name. If you observe carefully, this function which I'm creating, this function is expecting two inputs. One is f name and l name, and within the function, a full name is created and is stored in this particular variable which goes by the name full name, and that is what is printed. Every time I have to call this function, I can always call the function by its name followed by parenthesis. Okay, this is how we call, just the same way you would call just the same way you would call the print function, and the same way you would supply the data inside the print function, you would supply or pass the parameters. You know that while defining a function, what do you mean by defining a function? It is like making Python aware that there is a block of code which needs to be executed every time this function is triggered or called. Just like you call your friend in your room to get a job done, you call a function here to get a job done. What job? The two names which you're passing along, like Arun, comma Kumar, and Aditya, comma Sharma, and Vishal Verma. Okay. What's happening here is I am calling a function and I'm providing two parameters here. Python, encountering a call to a function, Python immediately jumps from here to here. The data that is coming along with the function called Arun and Kumar, they would go and correspondingly get stored in fname and lname. So Arun goes and gets stored in fname, Kumar goes and gets stored in lname, right? And inside this, when I am doing this operation fname plus space plus lname, then printing that full name, and then I come back at this point. I have done the job, function is, I took a jump to the function, did the job, and I am back. Now again Python encounters another call to the function with different data. So the same code which you wrote here, same has been made more efficient. Rather than writing the same code repeatedly, we have put that whole block of code which we would require to run repeatedly. You have put it inside inside a function. Okay, we give it a meaningful name, and we are just calling it time and again with just different data. If I run this, you shall see that it is doing the same job, right? So that is function. Now let me give you another example. Like I said, function can also uh, expect the parameters or expect the inputs and also return the values. When I say expect the input, these two parameters which you see, these parameters are the temporary variables which are created. They get created the moment you arrive at a function. So every time you arrive at a function, these parameters gets created and they get destroyed when you're back from the function. All right. Now let's look at another example. But before that, okay, let's take another example which shall return the values. Okay, one thing to note to all of you is these parameter or variable which are getting created inside a function, they are temporary. They get created only for the duration you are inside a function. So the moment you arrive at a function, these variables are going to be created. They will store the data. They will get used. This variable will be created. It will be utilized here. But when you are coming back from the function, all the data that was calculated, computed, and all the variables that were created inside a function, they are going to get destroyed. Okay. So if I try to print here, print outside the full name, then remember it is going to throw an error that full name is not defined, because full name was only alive, or it was only valid for the duration you are still inside the function. Okay. So how do we get the data out from the function? That means if I want to preserve my data which was created inside a function and I want to get it to the outside world, how do I get it out? Well, there is a keyword which is called as return. Okay. See, after running all the available instruction, Python is anyway returning back from the function, isn't it? But if you right now, if I run the program, see, there is no print, so nothing is going to be printed. But if I run the program, nothing is happening. Python is running. I mean, program is running. I am definitely taking a jump into the function and coming back. I'm doing this operation, adding the number, storing it here, and coming back. But there is no tangible output. You're not able to see any output because there is no print statement. But if you really want to print it outside, if you want to, whatever happened here, whatever data you computed, you want to preserve it forever, then what do? How do you get it to the outside world? If you write here print full name, this is not going to work because these are temporary variables which gets created only inside a function. So to do this, what you can do is you can write, there is something called as keyword called a return full name. Okay. So what's happening is the way when you call the function and you went towards the function, you took some data, right? These data were received by these temporary variables. Now when it is time to come back from the function, you're saying return full name. That means you're returning back with some data. But if I run this, definitely I'm coming back with some data, right? Either I'm coming back with some data like 100, or I'm coming back with the data like Arun Kumar, right? This is what I'm coming back with. This function call or this syntax, after coming back from the function, is coming back with some data. How do I preserve the data? What I'll do is I'm going to store that into a variable like this. Okay. So overall, what is this instruction mean? It means whatever is on the right side, please store it on the left side variable, that is name1. But on the right side, we don't have a explicit data like 100 or India. We don't have any such data, right, which can directly be stored. What we have on the right side is a function call. So Python knows that, okay, let the call happen, let whatever computation is happening out here in the function, let that happen. But when you come back from the function, you're going to come back with this data, and whatever the data is, that will get stored like this. Okay. And that is the data which will get stored here. Okay. So let me store all the data here like this. And if I were to print it, I can print name1 like this. I can also print name2 like this, and I can also print name3 like this. All right. Like this, one after the other. I can also put one below the other, not a problem. Something like this. All works the same way, right? Now let's look at another example. So the problem statement that we are going to consider is create a function to which if a list of integer is provided, the function should print the average of that list. Okay. So this is our programming problem statement. Let's see. Since it is asking me to create a function, let me create a function called as def. Since it says that I need to calculate the average, remember it's a recommendation that always name your function such a way that it should be so meaningful that the name itself implies what job it is going to do. So I'm going to name it calc average. So you can see by the name itself, you know that it is going to calculate the average, right? Okay. Now, since I know that my function is going to receive a list of integers, I will put just one parameter here, data. So any list that is coming in, it will get stored in this particular temporary variable. Now I know that I need to calculate average. I'll create a variable called as average here, and I'll write sum of data, because what is the formula of average? It's sum of the all contents divided by number of contents. So length of contents. What this is, I'm using the readily available functions. The sum function will calculate what is the sum of all the uh, elements that are coming in as a list and the length of list. Okay, and I'm going to print the average of list is avg. Okay, all right. So remember, if I call this function just like this, it is going to throw an error, because it would say that missing one required positional argument data. What it means is, you see, my function which I have defined here, it is expecting one parameter data, but when I'm calling a function, I'm not sending any data, right? Isn't it? So what I'll do, I'll have to send some parameter like 5, 10, 15, 20, 30. Now let me run this. You see, it has calculated and it has printed here. The same thing I can do by changing the content every time, like 80, 69, 89, 75. The same thing I can do here with 49, 59, 80, 86. Okay. Every time I run this, every time a function call is made with different data, I would jump here. Whatever the new data is coming, that will get stored here, and the average will be printed for me. Something like this, right? So this is the use of functions. You can write a piece of code under a name, and you can always trigger the call to that name by just changing the data. All right. Please observe the code here and try to do this by your own self, everyone. Now let's practice another question which will prompt us to use function as a concept in Python. So create a function that expects a list of numbers and returns the sum of only even numbers, right? So what I'm expecting is that I create a function such a way that if I pass any data like 5, 10, 20, 47, 23, then in this I should be that function, it should be picking up only the even numbers and it should give me the sum of only even. So here you can say that only 10 and 20 is the even. So I should be giving back, it should be giving me back 30. If I consider passing another data, say 100, 50, 21, 17, 3, 200. In this case, you will see that the even numbers are 100, 50, and 200. So I should be getting back 350, right? In this case, I should be getting back 30. So how do we do it? Let's first define, say maybe process data. I will create, and here I'm going to get data. Okay, though I can give any name. I can give data, I can give X, I can give list of nums. It is just that it is your convenient what parameter name you're deciding, because this is going to be the temporary variable which is going to receive a data. For now, I'm going to write pass. You know what pass is? Pass is, see, anyway, if you're creating a function, you will have to write a set of instructions here, right? But for momentarily, if you do not have anything to write, you can just write pass, because looking at the pass, Python just moves on. It is, for time being, I'm writing. Let me create a function call. Let me say here input data. Okay. Let me write here, say 1, comma 2, 56, 75, 94, and 15, and 10. So this is the data that I'm going to pass in the function call when I make. Here I'm going to, first I will have to decide, since I'm going to get a list here, list of numbers I'm going to get, I'll have to decide which are the even numbers, okay? And then I have to do the sum of those. So let me create a variable sum which is initialized to 0, and let me say for number in list of numbers, okay? I'm using the for loop inside a function. Remember, all the concept that we have learned you can always use interchangeably together to achieve the results. So since I have to validate which of them is an even number, I will have to walk through them one by one, right? And whichever happens to be the even number, in that case I'll have to keep on doing the summation of those. So for loop is going to help me walk through the numbers. And now I'll take decision if number modulus 2. So what modulus this operator is giving me back is, this is dividing the number by 2, and this collectively gives me back what is the remainder. So if, for example, if it is 10, if number is 10 and I am dividing it by 2, then what happens is 2 5 times is 10. There is no remainder, right? There is no remainder. So the answer for this would be 0. Okay. However, if the number is 11 and I divide it by, if I do the model operation by 2, then 2 5 times is 10, and this time the remainder is 1, isn't it? So this remainder is what is given by this modulus operand. And if I'm checking that number modulus 2, if it is equal to 0, then it is obviously conveying that the number is even, because even number gets perfectly divided by 0. In that case, what I'll do is sum equal to sum plus number. Okay. So this condition confirms me that, this decision making confirms me that the number is even, and this is adding me up. Okay. And here I'm going to return the sum. Remember, I have indented this because this is a part of if. I have indented this because this is a part of if, for. However, collectively, return is at the same level of for, if, and sum, because they are part of the function like this. So since I am returning, the function is returning something back, I am going to store that in response. Okay. I have created a variable. I'm going to store here the response, and let me print that. Since I've stored the response here or the result here, I can always access it again. The sum of even numbers is, look at this, 162. Now if I give 50, 100, 200, 15, 17, 11, you would see that only for these, this sum shall be provided. That is 260. Look at this, 260. Got it? Remember one thing, that if I am creating one parameter here, then you will have to provide that parameter. If you do not provide as many parameters as many the function is expecting, then it will throw an error. For example, if I write define addition and I'm saying x comma y comma z, and I'm returning or I'm printing the sum of x plus y plus z, then if I call this function, if I'm calling by 3 parameters, it will be well and good, it will be print correctly. But if I remove one parameter here, then what's going to happen is it's going to throw an error because one parameter is missing. So how do you tackle this? The solution for this is, you can always give back, you can always assign some initial value or default values. Okay. What happens is, since I'm not sending z here, the 0 shall be considered for z, and for x and y, these parameters which are coming in, they shall be given the priority. You see? However, there is one more case. What if this 5 was meant for z and 10 was meant for x, and it is y the value of y which you do not have. However, if you send like this 5 comma 10, then what happens is 5 goes in x and 10 goes in y. It's a problematic because you never meant that 5 is for x and 10 is for y. You meant that 5 is for z and 10 is for x. So what I'm going to write is I'm going to tell here itself that for z it is 5, for x it is 10, and for y, since you know that I have taken the backup option, that is I have assigned the default values, this default shall be considered. Okay, if I run this, it is giving me the correct result. If you want to observe what are the values here, let me print x comma y comma z, and you will see that it is 1005. All right, so this is how you're supposed to do. I'll be sharing for this particular session, you will be getting assignment booklet. You will have many practice questions for functions. Please attempt all of those to get a better hands-on and understanding of the functions, and thereafter we shall uh, move on to the more concepts. If you have any doubts, please connect to me individually. I shall explain to you these concepts based on your existing understanding and shall give you a better understanding. All right? Yes.